Patrick. He's one of the most important, I would say, startups specializing in startup law. You will see today it's really different than the normal law working. MashaAllah, their startup support legal, they work with a lot of VCs here in Saudi and back in Dubai. We will also highlight this. I don't want to take off a lot of his time. We'll have the session, then we will have also Q&A afterwards. So I'll leave it for
Assalamu alaikum. You'll have to forgive me, my Arabic switch. So if it's okay, we do English tonight. Hope that's okay. Okay. Do I just press the arrows on this to go through? Okay. I don't need to click this. Okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
That's fine. Okay. So, as Mazen said, my name is Patrick Rogers. I'm one of the founders of Support Legal, which is the region's first legal services platform devoted to entrepreneurs and emerging companies. A lot of what we do is helping tech companies raise venture capital. And we help people like you, young Saudis, young Kuwaitis, Emiratis, people living throughout the Middle East and Africa, structure their companies appropriately and make sure that the great ideas that they're working on don't get screwed up because they've made unnecessary mistakes. And there's a lot of them that you can make. So to be clear at the outset, what we're focusing on tonight and what we focus on with our business are tech companies that have the ability to scale. We look at companies that have the ability to branch throughout Saudi Arabia and then regionally and potentially to the rest of the world. We're looking for great ideas that can end up employing 500, 1,000, 10,000 people and raise significant amounts of venture capital from sophisticated investors. So that is our kind of main target at our firm. We have a lot of Saudi clients. Saudi is our fastest growing market, and we are not specialists in Saudi law. We work with colleagues who are based here, who are very strong on the Saudi law bits. But when it comes to venture capital, and we'll get to this, you typically have to structure your group company so that it has a holding company outside of Saudi Arabia. Because the laws here right now are such that venture capital firms won't invest in a Saudi company. You have to get to a common law offshore jurisdiction. We'll get to that as we go through. Here's just a quick overview of what we're going to run through tonight. So I'm going to give you a bit about our firm and what we do. We're going to talk a little bit about the Saudi VCs in particular that we work with and the regional VCs. We're going to show you some of the clients that we've worked with. I think you'll recognize some of them. And so you'll get a good feel for who we are and what we do. And then we're going to go through things like why you should have a co-founders agreement, what a typical company structure looks like when you're starting out in Saudi, and then what it looks like when you're going to raise venture capital. We're going to talk about different kinds of fundraising, from straight equity through to convertibles. We're going to talk a little bit about employee share option plans and how you can attract and retain great talent. So these are some of the subjects that we deal with every day when we're working with our clients. And we thought we would discuss these 4 or 5 things here tonight. And as Mazen said, when we're done, or even during the presentation, if you have a question, just shout it out. I'm sure a lot of people will be thinking the same things. So don't hesitate to cut me off and ask questions as we go through. So a little bit about us. We are a team comprised of lawyers who used to work at the world's best law firms. So we worked at major US and London-based firms in the region. So a lot of us worked in Dubai for these firms. Our typical clients were Fortune 500 companies, the government of Saudi Arabia, major private equity houses. So we were kind of up in that top echelon of the law. But we, as kind of budding entrepreneurs ourselves, when we set out to create what is now Support Legal, it was at a time in Dubai where we were getting approached by a lot of friends who were saying, I think I'm going to quit my job to do this startup, or I just got a term sheet from Wanda Capital, or I want to bring this co-founder in, but I don't know how to structure the agreement with him or her. Can you help me? And we ended up doing a lot of this stuff pro bono for free, and then it just kept cascading, and we said, there's a business here. So I was the first to quit my job, and then my co-founder Lee, a bit later, quit his job, and we've been growing the team, and we're now up to about 35 people. We started about 2 years ago, officially launched Support Legal about 15 months ago, March 2017. And we do things completely differently than traditional law firms. So your traditional big law firm has what's known as the billable hour. If anyone has seen Suits or any of the famous US law shows, you see guys walking around super expensive office space, there's secretaries everywhere. It's a hugely high cost environment. We've gotten rid of all of it so that we can pass the savings on to you guys. We don't charge by the hour. We do fixed fees, or we have a subscription model that we offer, because we found that the biggest wedge dividing clients and lawyers is the billable hour, because you don't know how much you're going to be paying until the end of the month when the lawyer presents you with a bill. So we say, forget that. We're the experts. We should know how much stuff costs. We'll give you a fixed fee, and then we can start building the trust relationship and help you grow your companies. You know, totally burnt out of their career and have gone to Thailand to sit on the beach. There are lawyers who have gone and done a startup, but they want to still make some money on the side. They work with us 0 to 20 hours a week from their homes, from coffee shops in their cities, wherever it is. But you know, we don't have the expense of having them in our office, on our health insurance, on a salary. We only pay them when they're actually doing work for us. So it's a good arrangement because they're looking for flexibility for whatever reason, and we're looking to have on-demand lawyers who are at the top caliber. And then we leverage a lot of technology to make our lives more efficient. Because we're not charging by the hour, we're aligned with the clients because we want to do things as efficiently as possible. I'll go through this. Like I said, we do utilize a lot of off-the-shelf technology, but we're also developing our own. So we've just actually hired a CTO, and I think we're the first law firm to do that, who's moving from San Francisco to join our team in Dubai. We're very excited about that. This individual is going to be working on everything from contract automation to a platform which will allow people to incorporate companies at the click of a button, or get a trademark, or do share transfer, whatever it is. So watch this space for Q4 this year when we start launching some of this stuff publicly. This is our core team. So these are my partners that you see here. And then, as I was just alluding to with our consultant team, these are all senior lawyers with 8 to 20 years experience at the world's top law firms, kind of scattered around the world. But we do have a core team of about 15 that work with us in the UAE.
And Saudi lawyers?
Not yet. We are in active discussions with a few because we are growing so rapidly here. We would love to have Saudi lawyers on the team. Some of our ex-colleagues that we used to work with at these firms are Saudi nationals, and so we're in some discussions. Here are a few of the deals we've done in recent months. So I think we've helped startups around the region raise north of $100 million in the last 12 months, which we're super proud of. A few of the Saudi ones on here. Golden Cent here. This was the first time Aramco invested in a non-Saudi company, so that was a very interesting deal. You had lots of different interests there. We had to work through a lot of issues, and we were really kind of creating the structures that I think are now going to be the go-to playbook for Saudi tech companies. Fly Akid, you may be familiar with. Woo! Yeah? Good. Excuse me. Who else is out here? Magnet, are you guys ever on Magnet? Do you know Magnet? Yeah? Okay. I'd say there's also a few very cool deals we're working on for Saudi companies that we can't mention. But a few others. Hunger Station here. If anyone knows Ibrahim, he was one of our first clients. I was one of his mentors through the Endeavor organization. I got to know him that way. And we've helped him with a couple of his partial exits to Rocket Internet and Delivery Hero. We're obviously very big players, so those were very interesting things to work on.
And in that particular deal, do you do the negotiation or
we do
only the legal work?
No, we do everything. We're there at the table with you, doing all the negotiations, over the weekends, late nights, doing the grinding. So snapshot of some of our clients here, a number of which we just mentioned. A few tidbits from some of our Saudi clients who we're very proud of. Ibrahim on the left, and you guys are familiar with PayTabs, who really have their HQ in Bahrain, but obviously they do a lot of business here. Abdulaziz is a Saudi, great guy. Very lucky to consider both of them a friend. Aramco Ventures and Omar here from Riyadh. I don't know if anyone has taken money from these guys or in the process of negotiating, potentially taking money from them, but two guys that we really like working with. Really strong venture capitalists, huge believers in the Saudi ecosystem and some of the fantastic companies that are growing here. Do you have a question?
So would you say your customer is the startups or the VCs or the investors?
We do not work for the VCs.
So startups are your customers?
Startups are our customers. But you can see the nice things the other side is saying about us, which I'm quite proud of. So the issue is, and we alluded to this earlier, the venture capital thing is quite sophisticated. It's quite a sophisticated area of law. There's a lot of nuance to it. There's cross-border structuring. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things that's problematic with legal services in the region and elsewhere around the world is that typically the only people that know how to do this stuff are lawyers at the major law firms. But those major law firms are not allowed to take startups on as clients. So then you're forced to go to lawyers that really might not know what they're doing. So that's the blue ocean space that we are in. And that's the void that we saw that we are taking advantage of to the benefit of our clients. We can go up against any law firm in the world. We can throw the best Aramco lawyers that they could possibly have because we used to work with them. These are people that we know, right? So it's not an issue. Our clients are always safe in the fact that they are not, even though they're saving a lot of money with us and they know the fees up front, they're not compromising on quality. And, may I add, we're entrepreneurs. So we get what you're going through. Sharif from 500 Startups. You guys are familiar with 500 Startups, and they are obviously very active and plan to be much more active in the kingdom. And Malik, the Golden Cent founder, who just raised the round we spoke about, and they are growing like crazy and will be raising again, I would say, quite soon. Some of the accelerators that we work with, we do hope to add Badr to this list relatively soon. I was out in Jeddah last week visiting with the guys at Kaust. We're going to be helping them out with their program. This is working with the accelerators is something that we really enjoy doing. So depending on the accelerator, we'll typically run a quarterly session, kind of like we're doing tonight, where we go out and the accelerator will call us and say, we're getting a lot of questions about X. Can you come out and do a session for us? And then Q&A opens up with the team where we run through a mock term sheet or whatever it might be. And it's a lot of fun. Some of our ecosystem partners mentioned some of these. And again, some of the VCs and angel groups that we work across from. Again, these are not clients, but these are firms or angel groups that we often see on the other side of the deal.
Which of the VCs you have worked up until now would you rate as the best one you have worked with?
Is this being recorded?
We can montage.
I don't trust the cameraman. I will tell you offline.
We can cut it out. We can cut it out.
No, I will tell you offline.
All right.
Anyway, these a lot of lovely people at these various shops.
Everyone is a habibi.
Okay, so let's get into the meat of it. So you saw some of the subjects we're going to cover in the chat. I always like to start with co-founders agreements because I think that is the first thing you should do. If you're a solo entrepreneur, fine. Bear in mind your chances of success are lower if you are a solo entrepreneur than if you have a co-founder. But that's fine. Sometimes it works. But when you're at the very early stage of your journey, right, you might still be employed, but you're thinking about quitting your job, and you've identified someone with a complementary skill set. Maybe you're great on the business development, and you've identified a person who's an excellent CTO, and you think we can build an e-commerce company. Let's talk about it. And you're thrashing the details out over coffee, and you're doing your big plans of who you're going to exit to in 5 years, all that fun stuff. That is the time to put something in writing. It could be 2 pages, 3 pages, but you just got to cover off some core concepts. Like, what are each of your responsibilities going to be? What areas are you going to focus on? How is the company going to be financed? Okay, so yeah, everyone wants to raise venture capital, but if you can't, how much money are you each going to put in? How much money do you have saved in the bank? When are you going to quit your job? One person might say, I'm out right now and you join in 4 months. Okay? The person who has quit and left the other person working wants to get that in writing, that that person is leaving in 4 months. What is the equity structure going to look like? Are you going to vest your shares? So that if someone, let's assume that you both get 50% of the shares on day one. What if someone goes and takes a job 12 months in, but they're holding 50% of the shares? That's not fair. And you're still working away at it? So there's a number of things, and they're quite straightforward, that you should do in a co-founders agreement to make sure that you're on the same page going forward. And this is one of the things I love that we did. We've got a website called supportscaleup.com. We'll see it at the end, but you can go on there and for free, you don't even have to leave your email address. We have automatable co-founders agreements or NDAs or term sheets. You can go on there and just by answering questions from a drop-down menu or yes or no's, you can create a 3 or 4 page co-founders agreement in 10 minutes. So there's no excuse anymore. You don't even need to go to a law firm. Early stage, get something in writing, because if you start having success and you don't have something on paper, people can get greedy, people's memories get a bit hazy, you forget about the spirit of the original discussions.
But in Saudi Arabia, the courts do not accept these agreements. You have to have a you have to go to a notary. Yeah, then like if you are a foreigner and you have a Saudi partner or angel investor and you are under his kafala, you have the court actually doesn't recognize anything as a partnership if you are a foreign founder. So you own 50%, you own 90%. At the end of the day, it will say, the judge or they will say like, there's no law that says that you can be a partner.
100%, which is why you never set up your holding company in Saudi Arabia.
Just yet.
But Saudi Arabia wants people to have companies in Saudi Arabia.
Of course they do, but they can't force you to. You can still have your operating company here, but you need your holding company in a place where all this stuff is possible. Right?
The
And
legal
contractually
entity.
enforceable.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that. Okay, here it is. Okay, so here's what your typical structure looks like when you get started. Very simple. Apologies, error, this should say LLC. You've got your founders, and you've got an operating company. So you set up an LLC. Sometimes we see just one of the founders create an establishment, and when the other guys come on, they convert it into an LLC. Whatever it is, you've got something that can enter into contracts, employ people, take an office lease, get a bank account. It's kind of your first step, right? You need an entity that can house your business. And once you start getting traction with this, and it looks like you're going somewhere, and again, we're not talking about companies here that just want to. We're in Riyadh tonight. Just stay in Riyadh. Get to 30, 40 employees. Everything's going good. We're talking about super growth tech companies that can get to 5,000, 10,000 employees, raise $10 million in venture capital. That's what we're talking about right now. But there are companies that are small that have the ability to get there very quickly, and it is not that expensive to future-proof your structure. And this is what we're talking about at a very simple level. So let's assume that, and again, coming back to your point, you could enter into a co-founders agreement, which could say something like, we agree that 6 months after incorporating our Saudi LLC, if there is significant traction, that we will create a holding company on top that then buys the shares of the LLC, and our co-founders agreement will be in relation to that company. So vesting, ESOPs, all that stuff works, right? That's straightforward enough. So again, the operating company is still here, but the founders who used to own this have sold their shares in it to this holding company. SPV means special purpose vehicle. It's a very low cost company incorporated in typically an offshore common law jurisdiction like ADGM in Abu Dhabi, which is basically a little piece of England and Wales, BVI, Cayman, some of these names will be familiar. But in these jurisdictions, you can have all the bells and whistles that venture capital firms will insist on. Again, all those VCs we just saw will never invest in a Saudi LLC. They just won't do it because they can't get the protections that they demand. So they want preferred shares. So preferred shares are distinct from ordinary shares. It's all the same here. So in Saudi and UAE, you can only have one class of shares, right? The company's laws don't allow for anything but that in the region right now. So that is the number one thing that they want. They want preferred shares, they can't get them. They can't get things like, this is more complicated, but like a drag or a tag along. An employee share option plan doesn't really work because options are not recognized. So all the stuff that kind of venture capital is really focused on when it comes to negotiating a term sheet, not possible under the Saudi laws, which is why we put the holding company in the middle here. The founders then take their shares here, and your seed investors are also introduced in here. And then what happens, assuming these are all Saudi nationals, no Saudi approval required if it's an ADGM company. This is then the sole, this company owns 100% of the shares of this, okay? So this is just employing people, entering into your contracts, taking a lease, getting sued, suing people, doing whatever it is. This company doesn't do anything, except it holds all of your intellectual property. It's the registered owner of your domain name. It's the registered owner of all of your trademarks. It's the registered owner of your source code. If you ever apply for a patent, this company owns it. Why? Because this will be in a jurisdiction that has, best-in-class intellectual property protection laws. Right now in the region, and things are changing, the IP protection laws are not robust enough. So there's plenty of examples where we've seen companies get burned because they're operating through a local company, let's say in the UAE, and the IP laws kind of predate the internet. So there's a lot of shortcomings and gaps in the law. So you want to house all of your intellectual property here. You want to have your employee share option plan here because it can actually work. This is where you enter into a shareholders agreement at this level. So when you have a shareholders agreement amongst the founders and your investors, it's in relation to this company, not this company. Okay? Because all the protections that the investors want, and quite frankly, all the protections that you would want as founders, you can have. Pretty much anything you agree to contractually works. You don't have to go to a notary to do a share transfer. Everything can be submitted digitally online. There's no original documents required. You never have to show up in person anywhere. As long as you've agreed to it in the shareholders agreement, a court will enforce that. And in a place like Abu Dhabi Global Market, court cases are done in 4 weeks over Skype, over the internet. You don't have to show up in person. So it's a totally different ballgame than the usual show you think of. If you get into a dispute here, most people just give up, even though they know they have a great case, because it'll be 5 years in court, and they'll have to spend $20,000 before they do anything. So, you know, it's an access to justice point, it's an ease of doing business point, and it's an investor comfort point.
So would you suggest going to a holding company, say in the development phase, even before going to a corporation?
So it depends on a few things, right? It depends on...
Especially in the, let's say, the co-founding development phase, which is the sort of thing.
So we have, of course, we have people that do that all the time, and the main reason they do it is because they've got a pile of cash, they're very serious about the idea, right? So they might be seeding it themselves, say, $250,000, right? And they're going to be hiring, you know, a big-time CTO, where they're outsourcing to the Ukraine, right? They want a company entering into that development contract, so that all of the IP that's being created by the developers, for instance, can come back into this company. It's not unclear who owns the IP that's being created. So that's definitely a big reason why people would do it early.
So what if, let's say, you started with the other approach, which is local company?
Yeah.
You have all the data, trademarks, and everything.
Yeah.
So you have to move everything to the
It's relatively straightforward. You can do it contractually. So you just have these two companies sign an IP transfer agreement, right? So you can move that over. The one cautionary thing is, you know, if you have these guys holding their shares directly here, or maybe you brought in one seed investor, if it's a Saudi LLC, you have to get all of those people down to the notary at the same time, and they all have to agree to do this. Even if you have a shareholders agreement where everyone said, we agree, we will do this, good luck. Right? They can hold you to ransom.
So the Sagia, only the Sagia element adds up into the structure if there's a foreign founder or investor or seed investor.
If this is a Cayman company, a BVI company, then even if these are all Saudis, you'll need a Sagia approval. Okay? But ADGM is recognized as a GCC company, even though it's basically England and Wales. So it doesn't, which is why this is a very attractive structure for Saudi startups.
But even if there's a foreign founder and it's a ADGM, it doesn't
The
need
second you have a non-GCC national in the mix, then you'll need a Sagia approval.
Right.
Yeah. But you know, look, Sagia has done an incredible job speeding up their processes, right? Remember when I first did my first Sagia approval 6 years ago? It took like 14 months.
Yeah.
We saw one happen in 3 days the other day. So
How about the taxes from Saudi? This foreign company
yeah,
have a different tax structure than Saudi, right?
20%.
yeah, with withholding tax. But you guys are assuming that you're making profits, right? High growth tech companies, if you're making a profit, you're doing something very wrong. You should be reinvesting all the profit, right, will be generated here within the country, within Saudi. And if there is any profit, it should just simply be reinvested into the business, whether in hiring team members or marketing, whatever it is, right?
If you're taking money at the end of the day home, you're doing something wrong.
In the early stages for a high growth tech company, yes. This is not a dividend play. You're swinging for the fences and trying to have a $100 million exit, right?
But who will do the converting the, let's say, local company to holding company? I think many startups in Saudi, they didn't start with a holding company, but they converted the company when the investors joined the...
Yes.
So that's typical how it works, or...
You're right. Most of the time what happens is that people don't do this until they're told to.
Yeah.
And why do they listen to those people? Because those people have the money. So they do it when they have to. The danger is that if you already have 4 or 5 shareholders here, and you have one shareholder who says, yeah, I don't like this deal, it can cause complications because you can't force that shareholder to do it. You can spend 2 years in court trying to force them to, but it can be complicated. So look, but you're right. Most people stay with their operating company structure, within Saudi until such point in time as it becomes clear that they're going to raise angel or venture capital.
Because who will do the work? It will take a lot of time and.
It can look. We're working on a bunch of these right now, where you're creating this and it's buying the shares in this from the founders. We can do it in 3 or 4 weeks if everything is moving quickly. So you do that restructuring at the same time as you negotiate the deal with the investors.
So kind of related to what you just said, what's the cost of making the holding company? Time and money.
Time and money.
Yeah.
Time. I mean, you can incorporate this in 48 hours.
Yeah. But then how about the cost? Is there like one
About $3,000.
Okay.
And you know, it does not. It's not allowed to take office space. It's not allowed to hire employees. It's just a holding company. It's just there to do those things that I said. Be your investment vehicle. Issue your ESOP. Hold your intellectual property. Do. It exists up there in the clouds. Yeah. So these are just some of the benefits that we talked about to spell it out a bit more clearly that we associate with a holding company in an offshore common law jurisdiction. So ADGM is one example. We highlight it here because it's very beneficial from a Saudi startup perspective for the reasons I just mentioned, that it's recognized as a GCC company. So if it's still 100% Saudi national owned, you don't need a Saudi approval. Obviously double taxation treaty benefits, you're a fellow GCC member, all of that stuff. Again, you need to incorporate the company, add a director, transfer shares. It's all done digitally online. And then some of the other stuff we talked about, you know, the quickness of the court system, the fact that again it's done online, share option plans, and multiple classes of shares, which was the original point we spoke about. Okay, let's move on to raising money. And we're going to talk a bit about equity financing on this slide, and then we'll talk about convertible notes in the next slide. So if you're raising money, you can broadly split your options into 2 buckets, right? You do what we call a priced round, where you sell shares in your company at a fixed pre-money valuation, where people are buying shares. They are going to be on your cap table, and they're paying a certain price per share. Okay, so that's a priced equity round. You're going to be adding new shareholders to your company. The other one is a convertible, where they're going to give you money now, but they will go onto your cap table at a later date, and we'll get to that in the next slide. So we'll keep it simple on the first one, and we'll talk about an equity, a straight equity investment. So the first question is, you know, do you need to raise money? A lot of times people don't. You can keep bootstrapping yourself, or you can get a bit more lean. You know, you might not need that extra employee. You might just reduce your office space, have everyone work from home. You can get another 6 months runway with the money you have. And why would you do that? Well, if you're a potentially high growth tech company, you do that because if you can get another 6 months traction, you can raise at a higher valuation and sell equity at a higher price, which means that you will own more of your company. So that's the number one question always. Like, yes, it's sexy to say, oh, I just raised $1 million from these guys. Great, did you need it? Did you actually need the money? Big question. People miss that sometimes. Start with that question. Do I need to raise? Can my co-founders and I come up with another $50,000 to get us through another 6 months? You know, we forego salaries, and we do that because we think, yeah, we can raise a $2 million valuation today, but at our current run rate, with the revenues we're generating, we could probably raise it $5 million in 6 months. And you should probably do that. Second point, what are you raising for? So if you want to raise that $1 million, have you really thought through what you're going to spend the money on? And that money should be spent within 12 months, 12 to 18 months, typically, because then you go to raise your next one. So that's your budget. Say 12 to 18 months, whatever you're thinking of raising, that money should get you through that period. And be very strict and realistic with your budgeting. Talk to people who have done this before. There's now a ton of successful tech entrepreneurs here in Riyadh, most of whom are very generous with their time, and they can walk you through some of the tough lessons they've learned. So again, we're talking about a priced equity round, and we're focusing on angel groups and venture capital firms that will be your investors. What typically happens in these cases, if you're in a position where someone's approaching you saying, I want to invest in your company, is that they will give you a term sheet. It's rare that you as the company give them the term sheet, because they're their terms. They're handing over the cash. They will present you with an offer. You don't have to take it. These things are heavily negotiated. Obviously, the key points of negotiation are the valuation. And so, if you're in a position where you know you're going to get approached by Aramco or RAD or RTF or STV, you should have yourself done a valuation exercise. And if you don't know how to do it, there are people who can, we help startups do that. You need some level of objectivity going into the valuation. So when they approach you with a term sheet, after they've seen some of your numbers, and you don't like their valuation, you can say, well, here's ours, and this is the way we did the calculations, yada, 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 yada. So that can help you get to a better position. In the term sheet are going to be things like, we are taking preferred shares. We discussed that before. So that's a term that I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with, but it can mean a lot of different things. But at the baseline, it means one very important thing. It's not an upside. It's not an upside add. It's a downside protection. So let's use an example. So STV comes to you and says, we think your company is worth $5 million post money. We want to give you $1 million. So that means it's $4 million pre-money, right? So $4 million plus 5. They're saying our $1 million gets us 20% of your company. Yeah? Everyone clear? So $1 million, $5 million post-money valuation. STV owns 20% of your company. You are going to have ordinary shares. Okay? So let's just say you're a sole founder. The post-money valuation of your ordinary shares is $4 million. Theirs is $1 million, but they have preferred shares. Let's fast forward 18 months. The company goes into the gutter. Okay? The plans were totally wrong. You screwed it up massively as a founder, and it's bankrupt. But it's got some valuable intellectual property. Maybe there's a really cool domain name that for some reason is now super popular. You can sell the domain name for $1 million. Okay? But that's all there is left. Because it's a tech company. You don't have heavy machinery or cars. There's no hard assets. All you have is IP and your brand. So in the kind of fire sale to try to get some money out, you can sell your domain name for $1 million. And you do. What happens in that case? All of the money goes to STV and you get nothing. Okay? That is a liquidation preference or a preferred share. So what they would say in the term sheet and in the shareholders agreement is that on a liquidation, so when the company is being wound up, we get a 1x or one-time liquidation preference. Okay? So they can either say, okay, the company is doing really well and is about to be sold for 100 million. We are going to convert our preferred shares into ordinary shares, same as the founder. Because we own 20%, it's being sold for 100 million, we're going to get $20 million. That's in the good scenario. In the scenario I just discussed, everything's gone wrong. The domain is being sold for $1 million. They're going to say, I'm staying with my preferred shares. I'm exercising my liquidation preference. I get the full $1 million. You founder, you get nothing. And then everyone goes on. So at a baseline level, that's how it works. You can see if it was a Saudi LLC, that wouldn't work, right? It was sold for $1 million, and they own 20% of the shares. They get 200,000, and the founders get 800,000. So when they're investing at a $5 million post-money valuation, they're saying, we're putting a lot of faith in the founder. This is a very new company. This is a hugely risky investment. 95% chance this thing fails completely. So to give us some downside protection, we are going to get a liquidation preference, which means that the first money to come out of this company pays us back our investment.
Usually it doesn't come up with 100%.
Correct. Yeah, and oftentimes you can't sell anything, right? Because there's no willing buyer. These are, all of you guys, if you're running startups, you're about to, these are very illiquid investments, right? They're not traded on the public markets. There's not a huge population out there that's trying to buy shares in your company, particularly when it's not going well. So you're right. Most of the time, these things just come to nothing. But like a great example was like if you can see the way the distributions amongst I think 7 share classes worked at the soup.com exit, right? The guys who came in with the last money, who invested at like a $1.2 billion valuation, I think the company sold for around 700, 670 or something.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was like 1 month span. It went down like $500 million. But because they were the last money in, and they had the senior preference, got the money. Right? So again, you can have different classes of shares, different preferences. You can have, and there are no rules to this. So a VC might come to you, and if they do this, run away from them and say, I want a 2 or a 3x liquidation preference, which means I get 3 times my investment back before anyone gets anything. So again, when you're in a common law jurisdiction, you can get super creative in the way you do the contractual arrangements. Things you cannot do under the Saudi companies law, UAE companies law, and most civil jurisdictions around the region. We're going to get into some more of this stuff as we go along. So I'm going to move over to the convertible stuff. Okay, so we talked about priced rounds. And again, a priced round is an investor actually becoming a shareholder in your company. They go onto the cap table. The other option, and these are very common for early stage companies, are doing what's known as a convertible investment. And they broadly take 3 forms. So you've got a convertible loan, you've got a KISS, that stands for a Keep It Simple Security, and you've got a SAFE, which is a simple agreement for future equity. What are these things? In very simple terms, someone is going to give you money now, but you're going to figure out the valuation of the company later. Okay, so we'll play it through. Using the earlier example. You're a founder, your company's doing pretty well, STV comes to you and says, we've seen your numbers, we like what you're doing, we want to give you $1 million, we think the company's worth $4 million. You say, forget that, the company's worth 10. Look at my figures, I've done evaluation, and you're arguing, not getting anywhere. What you'll say is, okay, let's just do a convertible, because then it, for the most part, takes the valuation discussion out of it. So how does that work? You sign an agreement, one of these 3 agreements. They give you $1 million. They do not become a shareholder on that day, but they have a right to become a shareholder. Now, what is that date? That date is the date on which you raise your Series A. Okay? So the first time you actually sell equity. So you sell. So when a shareholder goes onto your cap table in the future, let's say 18 months after they give you $1 million, you go out and RTF says to you, love what you're doing, I want to give you $3 million, company's worth 10, it's going to be a $13 million post-valuation, so here's the price I'm paying you per share. That is the time that STV's $1 million investment will convert into shares. And it'll convert in the exact same way that RTF shares work. So whatever rights RTF was able to negotiate with you, STV will get those same rights and the same kind of shares, except they will get a discount to the valuation. So because they invested earlier, they will get, say, a 20% discount to whatever valuation RTF gave them. And it can also be, not to get too complicated, but it can also be subject to a cap. So STV might have said, okay, here's $1 million. We're going to do a convertible loan with a 20% discount and a $5 million cap. So even if in that equity round you raise a $25 million, they're going to convert at $5 million. So it gives them that protection that the valuation isn't going to run away from them. Because obviously the lower the valuation, the more shares they get for their $1 million.
So it's like the stock options they give to the early founders.
There are definitely some similarities, but we'll get to this because the options should basically be free. At least that's our view. This is, you do a convertible because you can negotiate them very quickly, right? We've done plenty of these in 24 hours because they're pretty much standardized instruments. There are obviously elements you can negotiate, but you can get this done quickly if you need to. Or if you're in a position, if you're between rounds, let's say you've raised a Series A, okay? And you're coming into the summertime, and a lot of the investors are on vacation, but you're running out of money. But you know you're going to raise your Series B in December, and you know there's going to be interest, but you're in June, and you're going to run out of cash. You can go to your existing investors and say, let's just do a convertible, okay? I need $300,000 to get me through the next 5 months, and your money will convert into the same class of shares that we issue in December when we raise the Series B, but you'll get a 20% discount with whatever the cap is.
So it can happen at any time.
It can happen at any time. Now, it's very common as a first investment into your company to do this because if a company is 6 months old or 12 months old, it's really difficult to put a valuation on it. It's always difficult in venture capital.
You don't have metrics and traction to show.
You might have some, right?
Yeah,
but
that's not enough to.
It's a lot of this. It's a lot of guesswork.
And then this is a loan, right? So they have the right to give it back, right?
Some of them.
Yeah.
So this definitely is. This can be. It doesn't have to be. This is not. This can only be equity. It's a good point. Given the way, particularly in the UAE, with all the rounds being done, and the way that the onshore bankruptcy laws work, or debt laws, where you can go to jail for not repaying a debt, we always steer founders to this, to a safe, because it's not debt. It can only be described as an equity right.
Would you call it a bond?
No, I wouldn't call it a bond.
Convertible bonds?
You can call it a convertible bond, like this. I mean, yeah, it pays a coupon, but very rarely will you ever see an investor say, oh yeah, I just invested in this great startup and they're going to pay me 7% per annum on my loan. Right? It's really used as a threat against the founders. Like,
Free money.
you owe me money. Like, I can make this a debt. So think about that. They're investing this way because they want to convert it into equity, right? If they ask for their money and interest back, something has gone very wrong with the company. It's never a good sign for the company if people are saying, I'm more interested in interest and I want my money back. Unless the investor is desperate for some reason because they need some more investments or need the cash. So we've talked about the valuation cap. Again, each of these different things are flexible, as well as the discount. Yeah.
So just going back to your first example where somebody said they would invest $1 million and you're valuing your company at $5 million, and you said we're going to do a convertible a year later, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And let's say the cap was 20% then?
So there's no valuation on the company if you're doing a convertible. You can have a cap,
Yeah, and the cap is a percentage?
The cap is the valuation cap. So when my share, if I invest in you through a convertible, I'm going to say, no matter what valuation you raise at in the future, the highest value that my investment will convert into shares at is $5 million. So even in the next equity round, if you're able to raise at a $30 million valuation, my shares will convert at a $5 million valuation.
So it might go down in percentage. That is.
Yeah, that gives me more shares as the investor, right? We can talk. It's tough without a whiteboard and stuff, but because the investor is taking a risk in a very early stage, and you don't know what the valuation is, they're not. Say the company's 12 months old. They're not, and they're giving you 500 grand. They want that to convert relatively quickly, like say in the next 18 months. Because they want it to convert at a time when the company is still not that expensive, right? They give you $500,000 and you're able to operate with that cash for 5 years without taking any more investment, and you grow to be a $50 million company, and then you raise, a $10 million equity round at a $50 million valuation. It's a bad deal for them. Then they convert then, they'll own like 1% of the company.
Yeah, it's great.
Right? Whereas if they just negotiated a $3 million valuation at the outset, they would own, I don't know, 18% of it or whatever. So the cap is a way to protect them from the valuation running away. Yeah? So yeah, as we discussed, the equity funding round, your next equity funding round, after you take money through a convertible, is the trigger for that convertible investment converting into equity. So the people who gave you money through a SAFE or a KISS or whatever, then go onto your cap table, they become shareholders in the same way that the people who were your Series A investors do.
Can I don't like if you are not willing to convert it to equity, can you return that back to them?
So you want your money back as an investor?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you did a convertible loan or in some types of KISSes, but not with a SAFE. So yeah, let's just say it's a convertible loan. It's typically at the option of the investor, whether they say, okay, I want my money back plus the interest, right? Because these will typically accrue interest, or yes, I want to convert. There's also typically a long stop date. So a convertible loan might say at 24 months, it automatically converts at the cap valuation, right? Or at 24 months, if you haven't raised, I get my money back plus interest. So you can have those variances.
I want to get back to the cap.
Please.
Based on what? I mean, you set the cap.
Based on what?
Yeah, I mean, you set the cap of the evaluation. Based on the current status, is it something? I mean,
It's all negotiable. It's really what you can negotiate. So obviously, as the founder, you want a higher cap, and the investor wants a lower cap.
Okay.
Right? The investor wants the cap to be as low as possible.
Okay.
You want it to be as high as possible.
Cap is basically I think like SOM.
Okay.
تصيم شركتك يعني بنفسك.
Yeah.
It's like SOM, I don't know what it's called in English.
Bidding.
Yeah.
زي السهم.
No, not bidding.
So.
زي السهم.
Valuation basically.
It's you can say it's like a proxy for your valuation, right?
Right.
The cap is kind of a valuation.
Yeah. So the founder gets it as much as high as possible. The investor wants it as low as possible.
As low as
So
possible.
he gets the highest percentage.
So if you invest, if I'm your investor, I say, whatever the case, I want in, I'm going to give you $500,000. Obviously, if it's a $2 million cap, and I converted that,
Yeah.
I get, say, that 20% of the company.
Yeah.
If it was a $5 million cap,
I'm going to do that.
I get 9% of the company.
500 plus.
Yeah?
Okay. Okay.
So if I could just focus a bit
Come on.
on each of these litigation,
Yeah.
which type of process is there on? I don't see anything that
have, it's very rare. Okay. And typically, there's not a cap because the investors didn't know what they were doing. In almost every case, there's a cap and a discount. SAFE is becoming very popular. We push the SAFE very hard. Our starting point for companies, if they're doing a convertible, is always do a SAFE because it's not debt, right? So you're never going to get into trouble, with debtor's prison or anything. It's quite founder friendly. It's a very short form document, so you can negotiate it super quickly. Yeah, we like the SAFEs for our clients.
What's the average discount rate?
Typically 15 or 20%. Yeah, I'd say most fall into that. But obviously, as you negotiate, as an investor, if I negotiate a higher discount, then I might be giving a bit more on the valuation cap, right? So you can move those two back and forth as the founder. You might give someone a 20% discount, but you might be able to get the valuation cap $500,000 higher. So you have to crunch those numbers a bit and look into the future and do some kind of mock assessments. Okay, well in 18 months if we raise $1 million and I do this, that's what it'll look like for the investor, but if we do this, that's what it'll look like. You're trying to make it so that they get as little equity as possible. Yeah?
So you're talking about how if investors want their money back. What about promise?
Yeah.
If you, as a founder, want to give the money back. I know usually they don't want that.
No,
Is there an
yeah, no,
option
it's a great question. We've seen that. Yeah.
What
So-
happens in that case?
The way these are typically written is that the option is with the investor. So it's the investor's choice whether they can ask for their money back plus interest or they convert. We have seen cases where founders are able to negotiate that it's their choice. So, but you would typically they would give something away for that. So they might give a 20% interest rate on a convertible loan. Say, look, I'm going to give you 20%, but it's my option to decide whether you get to convert or not. I just might want to pay you back, and because the equity is very expensive, I might want to conserve that equity.
And that's less common.
So basically, the
Yes.
founders are taking a loan, but not from a bank. From the
Correct.
investor.
Exactly. So they're basically treating it like a loan.
Yeah.
If you're seeing high interest rates, and you'll often see this from existing shareholders. So in that bridge situation where I was giving an example from Saudi summertime before, where you need to raise, but it's June, it's Ramadan, right? You're like, shit, I don't have enough money to get me through to November. I'm going to raise from my existing shareholders. I'm not going to go to new investors, but we'll do a convertible. But the shareholders might say, I'm already in for a lot of the equity, but I want to make sure this company survives. So we'll do a convertible, but I'm going to get a 20% annual interest rate. Because what I'm basically saying is, I'm going to get my money back when you raise that round in November. But it's going to be expensive for you. It's
Yeah,
gonna be
basically
expensive.
like a lifeline.
Exactly, because you, as a startup, you can't get a bank loan. Right? Any other questions?
The discount is holding for the next round or for this round? I mean, if there is an investor in seed round,
Yep.
they will, an agreement says that we'll get 20% discount in next round
Yep.
if they enter. So is that what's it actually discount or the discount in?
That is the discount. So that's exactly, is that what you're asking? Is that what the discount means?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll get a 20% discount on the valuation of the company that the Series A investor is able to negotiate. So they allow future investors to negotiate the terms that will attach to their shares. And then they'll get a 20% discount on whatever the valuation of the future guys are able to negotiate. Clear?
Yeah, but the discount not in the cap.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, okay, great point. So it's typically the lower of the valuation minus 20% or the cap. You don't get some people try this on, always reject that. Some people say, well, okay, I've got a $5 million cap, you raised at 10 million, so I'm taking the cap and I'm taking my 20% on the cap. So I'm at 4.2. You get the cap or you get the discount. You don't get both. The last 2 points. What happens if you do a convertible, but then you never raise money again, and then you sell the company? What happens to the people who are not shareholders of your company? They're not on the cap table, that you just sold. The convertible notes should contain a provision which deals with that, which will basically say the cash is deemed to convert at the cap immediately before. So they basically get converted at the cap. That's one of the ways to do it. And again, the maturity date, like I said, particularly in the case of the loan, convertible loans, 18 or 24 months is typical. So VCs or angel groups or family offices, whoever, if they're giving you cash through a convertible, they want to keep you focused. They want to keep you focused on raising that next round so that they convert and go onto your cap table. So they want to put they want to give you a deadline. And they'll say, you know, this convertible note will bear interest at the rate of 5%. I've got a $2 million cap, and it expires in 24 months. So 24 months, I as the investor can say, okay, give me my money back plus 10% over the course of those 2 years. Or I can convert at the cap if you haven't raised money. But that deadline is put in there, particularly in the case of convertible loans, to keep you focused. Here, I don't want to overcomplicate this. Okay. And we're going to open this up for Q&A afterwards, so don't worry if we're not in the right category. IP protections. And we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about ESOPs, and then we're kind of through the meat of it. We touched on this briefly earlier when we were talking about the reasons for setting up a holding company in a common law offshore jurisdiction where the laws and regulations have very robust intellectual property protections. So you know that your development team that's working on your product, when they assign all of their rights to the company, that all of those rights are held with the company. So what does that mean? It's a good thing, because a lot of the tech companies we work with here don't realize they should be doing this. If you've got developers that you have hired, or if you've got an external developer living somewhere else in the world that is creating your product for you, again, your company does not own machinery, doesn't have factories, you have no hard assets. All you have is this stuff that you can't touch. It's up in the ether, it's code, it's zeros and ones. How do you ensure that you own them? Not you, but how do you ensure your company owns them? Your company, your holding company, should be entering into an agreement with each of your developers which says that this company is paying the developer cash to develop a product, and you describe what the developer's job is, and the developer promises you that everything they're creating is the property of the company, and that they have no rights to it, and that they assign and transfer any present or future rights they have to that IP to the company. This is a question that will always come up when investors come to do their diligence on your company. They will look at things like, okay, do you have a shareholders agreement? Okay, have you ever been sued? Let's see if you have any lawsuits. Let me see your employment agreements. Okay, what IP do you own? Okay, who's developed your IP? Oh, the developers in Ukraine? Let me see your IP transfer and assignment agreements. What? Oh, well, no, they've done it. We paid them. Okay, but they're not employees? No, they're consultants. Yes. Did you sign any agreement with them? No. Do you actually own what they created for you? Maybe. You thought your company was $5 million? Might be zero. We've seen this happen. It's a freaking nightmare, right? You can have these developers, in Eastern Europe that basically steal your code, and because you have no agreement with them, good luck to you. So again, two things there. The importance of having a holding company that can actually own this stuff. And number two, getting an agreement in place with the people who are building it. They could be your employees, or they can be external consultants living in Riyadh or in another country. But you have to have a very clear agreement in place so that when you get diligenced by a VC or an angel group about your IP, which is what they're investing in, they're investing in two things. They're investing in you as a founder, because they believe in you, and they're investing in your tech. So you've got to make sure you own your tech. Otherwise, there's not much for them to be investing in. Yes?
A small question. Can you do it the other way around? I have a small company on Abu Dhabi Global Market or something that will have all my rights, but it's owned by the Saudi company. To do these things.
No. Well, sorry. Yes, you can, but you wouldn't do that. And why wouldn't you do that? Because the shareholders in the holding company, want the holding company to own everything to do with the business. So it should own every single subsidiary, right? So this is its first Saudi subsidiary. It can go into other countries. Every new company that's created for the whole group should be owned by this. So all the IP is here, shareholders agreements here, and every single subsidiary it ever creates, all owned by this. So that is one group. If you had this on top, and then these guys on top of that, it'd be inverted and it wouldn't really work.
Yeah, that's if I want to invest. If
Yeah.
I want just to protect my IP,
Yeah.
to have a partnership with a foreign company or so.
Yeah,
That might be a way that I can do
it could be, but I'll give you another reason why you wouldn't do that. If this was on top of your holding company, and this has all your value, right? This is where your IP is. But it's owned by this company, so again, we're inverted, and this company gets sued. The company suing you can go after all of the assets that this company owns, and these are the crown jewels. And because this is a subsidiary of this, it's the number one thing they're going to go. In this structure, if somebody sues this company, they can't go up. They can only go down. Yeah?
What about suing the holding company in that case?
For
Is
what?
that not possible?
But how could they?
That's
Because
why-
the holding company never enters into contracts, remember, right? It has no contractual liabilities. It doesn't employ anybody. It doesn't enter into an office lease. It doesn't enter into contracts with third parties. It doesn't have any supplier agreements. It has nothing.
So it's just in
Just one
cyberspace?
It's a holding company. It's a shell. It has the ESOP. It has the IP. And it has your shareholders agreement. It's clean. Nothing above it except the shareholders.
It's hard to sort them.
Yeah, so just to finish off on IP protections we talked about earlier, trademarks, patent applications, copyright, your domain name, any goodwill that can attach to your business, all of that is intellectual property, and if you're a tech company, that's your value. That's your secret sauce. So it should be held in a company that is incorporated, that is in a jurisdiction which can properly protect you. Employee share option plans. Who's heard of an ESOP? ESOP? No? One or two? Okay. So ESOP stands for Employee Share Option Plan. Again, not possible to put these in place under the laws of Saudi Arabia. You can enter into agreements with your employees to make certain promises, like, if we sell the company, I promise to give you 1% of the proceeds, stuff like this. But this is something that when we do these are properly enforceable agreements. So why would you, let's back up. What is an employee share option plan? It's a plan, it's an incentive plan that the board of a company decides to put in place to help the company attract and retain talent. As an early stage tech startup, you don't have a lot of money, which means that you can't pay high salaries. We'll use our earlier example of the kind of rock star CTO that you're trying to hire. The guy might be at Accenture, making 70,000 reals a month. He's really excited about your idea. But you say to him, "Look, I can only pay you 20. So you've got to take a massive pay cut. Why would you do that? You would do that because you're going to give him options. You're going to give him a pathway to become an owner of the business. So when you show him the projections and you say, look, we're going to be raising a $5 million valuation in like 6 months, and I think we see this huge opportunity, I bet we can sell this thing for $50 million in 5 years. If he's got 5% of the cap table, he's going to do okay. It's a lot better than sticking with his job. And you know, it's going to be a fun ride. So it's a way to attract and retain talent. Here are some of the kind of terms. We'll talk about a few of them that you typically see in a plan. So again, the plan is created by the board of directors, okay? And then with each of your employees, the company, your holding company, enters into what we call a vesting agreement with them, which grants them their options. So that agreement says, I'm giving you, as the company, the following options which you can exercise, and if you exercise them, they turn into shares. So you will then become a shareholder of the company for a very low price. So typically, you know, for the ESOPs we draft, if people exercise the options for shares, they're paying 1 cent per share. The value of the shares may be $50, but they get them for 1 cent, which is totally doable if you're in a proper jurisdiction.
And what they can liquidate this?
So you don't want them to. And they're, as we discussed earlier, these are pretty illiquid investments anyway. If you own shares in a startup, there's not a lot of people that are going to be approaching you trying to get that. But you want them to hold these through to exit, or to the point where they leave. And we'll talk about that in a second. So let's use our same example. So you kind of had this discussion with your prospective CTO. The person has decided they will come and join you, but they say, I want a 5% ESOP grant. Translation, they want, after they are fully vested, to own 5% of the company without having to spend money for those shares. Okay, so it's what we call sweat equity. So instead of buying shares at a proper valuation, you are earning those shares through your sweat or through your effort. Okay, so a typical ESOP grant, you would say, okay, CTO, I'm going to give you 5%. It's going to those options are going to vest over 4 years with a 12-month cliff or a 12-month probationary period. So you won't vest anything for the first 12 months because I want to make sure you're good and you haven't fooled me and you're going to work hard. It's your probationary period. You get no options for the first year, and then on the first anniversary of your employment, you start vesting. And then you will vest your whole 5% over that 3-year period, or for 36 months. Does that make sense?
So each month they will get...
You can say each month, or each quarter, or each year. It's all, you can do it however you want, but that's the principle. So you're trying to lock this person in for, say, 4 years, or at least 3 years, because you've invested a lot in them, and you're going to be depending a lot on them. And this is the way you do it. And obviously the hope is that the company keeps increasing in value so that those options become, more and more pricey. And they're more and more motivated to stay with you and keep doing great development and all of these things. I'll just highlight one more point. We can go to Q&A. What happens if they leave? What happens if you're 2 years in, they've started to vest, so they've gotten past their probationary period, and they've had 1 year of vesting. And then they say, alas, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. The way that your plan is written, it should have a right for the company to repurchase those shares from us. Because the original promise was that they would stay with the company for 4 years. And if they leave after 2 years, you don't want that person being a shareholder in your company, because they haven't actually given the company cash for those shares. They were granted those shares basically for free on the promise that they would stay with you for at least 4 years. And so that's the company exercising its right of repurchase over those options. So you can force that employee to sell the shares back to the company. And that will be enforced by a court. Acceleration, I'll just touch on that one too. Yeah, sir.
For which evaluation? That's the one on that.
It's at the price, it's at the exercise price. So their exercise price, so if I gave you 1,000 options over 4-year vesting, 12 months, but we're at the 2nd anniversary of your employment. So you didn't get anything for the 1st year, and then you vested, let's say you use 6,000 options over, so you vest over 3. So you've vested 2,000 options, and you've exercised those options, so you've turned 2,000 options into 2,000 shares. You're now a shareholder in the company. Your exercise price for each option to turn that option to a share was 1 cent, for a 1/10 of a cent. Okay, that's all you pay. The price per share of the company at that time, like I said, maybe $50. You don't have to pay fair market value because we've agreed this. So when I force you to sell those back to me, it's at the exact same price that you bought them. So I pay 10 cents for them. Question? Oh, no battery.
Okay.
This is our website that I mentioned earlier that has the free documents on there that you can automate. It's got 30 articles on all the topics we discussed tonight and a whole bunch more. It's being converted into Arabic as we speak. It'll be live in Arabic in June. Thank you. We're super excited about that, so you guys will be hearing more about that. Support scaleup.com. I've got business cards here, it's on that too. Here's kind of a look of what it is, and we write the articles in a very casual way. So, dear founders, please note the following: love your lawyers, right? This is like key stuff that you should be thinking about when you're going to start a company, or you're about to bring on a co-founder, that CTO, or whatever it is. So everything from trademarks to ESOPs, term sheets, employee share option plans, it's all. I think I am done. Here's a bit of our media coverage, but that's us. We're done.
Thank you very much. Please, very
I gotta take a selfie with all of you guys. Can everyone stand up, please? Sorry, just for the show. That's good. Very proud of that.
Let me turn it off.
Come on, everybody stand up.
Wait. Let me turn the light off. Give me a second.
Oh, it's this light. Can we turn this up?
Yeah, wait. That's easy. That's
The projector.
the old school.
Full school?
Yes, that's it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody in.
That's awesome.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Nice. Okay.
Thank you very much. Before we go into the Q&A, I had some questions about scale up, or upscale, sorry. Upscale. So it's, and Salah had a phone number. Please just tell us more about the space.
And I want to but thank you very much. I really like the sessions. We've had sessions, but this is very informative, very valuable. And I have another question because we have this happening very often. So startups, entrepreneurs, they have all these questions. They approach for these kind of questions, and I think we can have a couple of these sessions every once in a while.
For sure.
About the upscaling
الواحد عنده استفسار ممكن just تعطينا بس نبدا كيف طريقه العمل if they want to rent some of the space how في ناس
شوي.
أول شيء شكرا. Thank you very much all for coming and thank you for the great presentations and information. Upscale co-working space environment. We have an open area space for rent per month and per day, and we have private offices per hour, per month, whatever you want to use it. And we have meeting rooms or a conference or big meetings like that, courses. The offices will be rented for day, hour, monthly, yearly, and we are certified from SMEA to give a license. And we are one of the first co-working space who's licensed to give certifications for entrepreneurship businesses. as well, and what we have also.
We want to focus on the community.
Yes, we build a community cultural more than just a space. The way we work as individual companies, they work together to deliver a project or whatever business they have. They can imagine that they have a different department with different all companies. They work on one goal to deliver a project with a good high quality without having high cost. So we are trying our best to build a community as much as we can with the team effort, family model. And we will thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We insisted to change Badr because everyone knows Badr, but not all of us knows about upscale. And we'll do that more often. We'll, you guys will explore different areas here in the because it's hidden, as you can see. It's within a building. Would like
We have some.
Yeah,
That's a confidential, but it's a surprise since you said that.
yeah.
We're having a new building, a whole building, 4 stories, for a co-working space. One of the first co-working space taking the whole building as a co-work spaces. There's a separate offices, meeting rooms, conferences, and co-working space, and lounge, and rest area with the private cab and memberships starting from lounge. You can take just a lounge membership just to come to study, to do your work, to enjoy the coffee, to relax and enjoy your days. And you have the higher membership, which is the co-work spaces, which is give you an office, a desk with lockers and utilizing the internet, the coffee.
Where are you?
It's next to King Abdullah Economic City. Yes.
When?
Inshallah, we need the end of the month. We should establish a new space, and we would like to have you there. So it's not heading anymore. We have a whole
I'll leave it to your question, guys. We'll have 10 to 15 minutes Q&A.
Sure.
Also, we'll have some for you. Shabab, yeah. Because they were going to grill you, I think. Shabab, yeah.
Calls in UAE, 100% foreign ownership.
There was an announcement that is totally out of line with what is actually going to happen.
All right, so it's just a propaganda for the export unit.
So they've allowed Apple and Tesla 100% onshore foreign ownership recently. So that's kind of a test for what they're going to do with major conglomerates. It's not going to be for the little guys.
But startups, nothing is going to change for startups.
And the startups, they're all going to stay in the free zones anyway, because they've got the clusters there, right? So if you're a tech startup, you want to be in Media City or the Dubai Design District, you want to be around the other startups where you can own 100% of your company, or you can have your holding company own 100% of your company.
So in Saudi, SAGIA requires you to pay 20% corporate tax if you're a foreign company. How does that work out?
20% tax on profits.
On profits, right.
Yeah.
Let's say in a scenario, a startup is making profits and it's registered as an ATGV and it has a SAGIA license and everything. So how does the whole structure work out? Are they going to pay 20% tax on profits that were generated within Saudi Arabia?
If the profits are distributed to the shareholder, which is ADGM, yes.
And what about profits like digital products? You are selling them all over the world, right?
Yeah.
What about those?
You need to be speaking to tax advisors to structure. If you're selling all over the world, you should have way more than 2 companies.
Yeah.
Right? You should be generating perhaps a European profit pool, right? Or maybe through Malta or something.
Yeah, so having different umbrellas in different regions is the best practice.
That comes down to like a tax efficiency planning thing. If you're doing that well and you're actually profitable, you'll be engaged with Deloitte or PwC to plan that for it.
Yeah, but you got to know like the road ahead. You can't just go and drive and not know what signs are coming up or like where you are actually going.
But a super successful tech company that is profitable is a rarity.
Yeah.
It's very rare
Yeah, of
in this
course.
region, right? So it's, you know, like there's 5 of them.
Karim and Uber is not so
How related to smart
Karim
let's say you give the partners some options.
Like conversational account. What is it?
Customer experience.
No, they are similar issues.
How much do you salary
What should I
is lower than the range? I mean, if there's a percentage,
My
I mean,
so if he gets you, let's say,
حتى كريم
ايه كريم ما في احد
10% lower, 20% lower than market.
well, I mean, we see people going to startups who are making $500,000 a year, right? So they're on very good salaries who, you know, take an 80 or 90% pay cut because they believe in the idea. They might get, you know, 3 to 5% of the option pool. We see other people who, you know, they might be on a $5,000, $6,000 a month salary, and they reduce to like a $4,000 month salary. So it's less of a gap, but it's totally, there's a huge range. It's all over the place. But I mean, I guess the rule of thumb is the higher the salary the person has who you're trying to get to quit to join your company, the more options you're probably going to have to give him or her.
So since you were talking about how to do things so you don't get in trouble, get sued, or get bankrupt, or anything like that, what I'm wondering about, what about ethical concerns? Like if a business is doing something that is unethical, what do you guys do as lawyers? Or, you know,
So if one of our clients is
maybe
doing
doing
something,
business that has ethical concerns?
if it's one of our clients, it's a very complicated question because we as lawyers have obligations to serve our clients even if they're doing something that we don't agree with ethically. So we have a professional obligation that extends beyond our moral convictions. That it runs into a wall at a certain point in time where, because we have our duty of confidentiality, non-disclosure, all this stuff, right? So a court cannot compel me to tell them anything about your company if you're my client, right? So
Yeah.
it's a very difficult question for me to answer.
No, I know. I'm not talking about, you know, are you gonna like sue them or get in trouble. I'm talking about how do you deal with them. Like, you know, if you
I deal with them like I deal with them like I deal with a friend who I have concerns about their moral compass. We'll sit down and have a conversation and I'll voice the concerns
Have you had that case though?
many times. And there's stuff that they're kind of moral quandaries all the time. Like in the case of you're running out of money, you've got great employees. One of the employees has, you know, 3 kids at home. Their spouse isn't working. You know this is going to be disastrous for their family, but you have to do what's best for the company because there's 30 other employees there. What do you do? Right? We have those conversations all the time. Those are tough conversations.
Working with a lot of Saudi startups, what's the most, I would say, common legal mistakes you do?
Structuring.
Structuring, the cap table, no.
Company
All
structure.
company structure.
Yeah. People not understanding, because it can take a while to do this restructuring, people not understanding that they won't be invested in.
Okay.
Their Saudi LLC is not investable.
Yeah.
And people being very surprised by that. Or people saying, oh, I've got options in place for my employees.
Yeah.
Well, you don't actually. That's the number one thing.
Number 2 on the list.
Number 2 on the list, lack of documentation.
Sure.
Generally, even like employee agreements,
Oh.
right? You know, if you're a high volume e-commerce company, you've got a lot of suppliers, etc. No agreements.
Sure. And one other question, maybe for around, due to the lack of supply and demand in terms of investors versus startups, usually some angels, they make good benefit out of this by taking a lot of higher shares than normal. That will lift the co-founders or founders with, I wouldn't say the majority, but the minority, or maybe below 50%. That might go well in the seed round, but when things goes well and they want to raise the early stage first round, they face this challenge by VC. You need to guys revise your cap table to make it more compelling for the founders and co-founders to get excited.
This is a very important point that Nazim raises.
How could we solve that?
It's a very important point, and yeah, we do see this with some frequency, and I didn't mention it in the equity discussion. So, if historically here, when we're talking about brick and mortar businesses, a lot of investors, let's say that you're a typical family office here who's invested in real estate, or oil and gas sector, or whatever it is over the years. When they go to make an investment, typically they want to get control. And because there's only one class of shares and everything else, control means I'm buying 51% and I want to be the chairman. That's a typical conversation, right? That can be the death stamp for a startup. So if you're early stage and you're a tech company and your first investor is a Saudi family office and you sell them 51% of the shares, and you go to and you're successful, and you go to raise money again in 12 months from a VC, and the VC sees that your seed investor owns a majority of the company, they won't invest in you. Because they'd say to you, you don't have enough skin in the game anymore. You've already sold a controlling stake to this one investor. You've also given the chairmanship to, sorry, you're going to go invest in one of your competitors. So again, a rule of thumb, for any equity round, you shouldn't be selling more than about 20% of your equity. Okay? So in simple terms, if if you can get a pre-money valuation of $2 million, you shouldn't be raising more than $400,000. Yeah? I think that math is right. I'm a bit tired. Oh, sorry, $500,000. $500,000. Yeah, because that's 2.5 close. So that, or if you're raising, you get the picture. You shouldn't be doing more than 20%. And that, so if you're, and again, if you're raising every 18 months, so 20%, 18 months later, your valuation has gone up. You sell another 20% at that higher valuation, gets you another 18 months, do it again, and then hopefully you get to the exit.
A lot of local founders have been stuck in this scenario, actually.
Yeah.
How do you solve it or structure it in a way that you can go to VCs and you can raise money?
You have to have a very frank conversation with the investor and say you can own a big piece of a pie that might not exist in 6 months, or you can restructure this and take a smaller piece of a much bigger pie. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're invested in a Saudi LLC, again, because there's no way for you to force them off the cap table and everything has to be done in front of the notary, you have to hope that your investor is reasonable, otherwise you're screwed. But if you bring the VCs in, right, it's an education process. And you have to explain to them, and you hope they are reasonable. And a lot of guys are, because they'll get that, they'll be like, well, I don't want to just throw my money down the drain. I don't want to own 51% of nothing. It's better for me to own 25% of something.
But what if you are screwed?
Then you're screwed.
Yeah,
Start another step.
nothing is screwed.
In this country with these laws, you are screwed.
Yeah, I know I'm screwed.
Get over
The
it.
thing is, no, getting over it is not an issue.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
the issue is,
you
the
might.
issue is like, for founders,
Yeah.
a lot of times, startups or what they are working
Look,
on
my
are
guess
like
is-
their babies,
My guess is if
So
you're,
it's
if
not
you're,
easy to get
if you're
over
in
it.
that position, my guess is if you're in that position, you probably haven't taken all the steps required to move all the intellectual property into a company. Everything's up in the ether. You go and put a new name on it, put a new holding company in place, get the source code in there, and just start over and say, hello, enjoy your 51%.
Actually, my intellectual property, everything is under an umbrella in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm good with that. But at the end of the day, my target market is the Saudi market, or the GCC market, or the MENA market, and Saudi is one of the biggest markets within the region. So, like, if I leave, I can't easily come back or do business here. You see, like, it's a loophole. So you go around and around.
These are distinct problems for you, my friend. No one in this room has that particular problem.
And today, I met one of my colleagues in Silicon Valley. He just said, we just got our license from Isagia. They are a Silicon Valley company who are officially registered here in Saudi.
Excellent.
They will get their license and they will work smoothly. And inshallah, link with them. They make a lot of bigger work. But now things changed as
I know, all changes. Actually, like, you know, the CEO of Waed, Mr. Khalid, like a lot of VCs in the market, and we got an acquisition offer too, and they were like, you need to do what you said exactly, like move on or like fix the issue and be tell the guy be reasonable, and you want to own 50% of nothing, or you want to own 10% of something. But in Saudi, you can only say Allah Kareem.
Shabab, Asila, any more questions?
What kind of?
Let's say I'm not sorry.
Yeah,
I'm not rushing this. I'm sitting investing around any soon. Should I move the public company as of now? Let's say I'm away 8 months or months from going to the first round. Let's say.
A lot of it will depend on your co-founder situation. If you're a sole founder, you basically have no risk because you control everything. If the more founders you add, the higher the risk that something can go wrong. So, and again, if you have a co-founders agreement in place that provides for things like vesting of the equity and all of this, you should have that in a place where it's actually enforceable. Yeah.
What kind of due diligence the VCs actually do in the serious seed round, and how usually it long to take?
Why don't we have Abdullah answer that one? What kind of diligence do VCs do in a seed round here? So what were you asked for by Inspire Ventures? What was
Documents,
financials?
Yeah.
Usually during the seed round, you're basically just starting, you're making the revenues, and there's not a lot of stuff that you can realistically go through. They're just going to go through the team, the idea, what you have done so far. But at later rounds, maybe you will take much longer time. They will go through the financial statement, they will go over your numbers, making sure they are right, they are just like what you're saying. They will have to see the whole team with them. They will need to see every single detail of the operation. It's different from investor to lender. VCs usually are more they usually take a lot more time than the normal angel investors, and but I think what's the best thing you can do is to be prepared before starting the due diligence. Your financial statement should be ready all the time.
How long did it took you, Abdullah, to close your first seed round?
Well, the seed round is tough, maybe between 3 to 4 months.
3 to 4 months.
Usually it takes a lot of time because of the legal negotiation and everything. That's not because of the legal. No, it was a VC. But then I think it's not also normal for seed round to take that much time. It's usually much less, but due to we only have a bunch of VCs in the region, so
Supply
you don't have the upper hand.
there's getting more and more.
Yeah.
So it's, But this so everything, they definitely want to meet the team, right? At the very early stage, the most important thing is the team and the idea. Then they'll want to look at the traction you're getting, so they'll want to see the financials and all that stuff. As you get into later rounds, they'll go deeper and deeper and deeper. But the one point I want to highlight that Abdullah made, which is a very important one, your business can be a great business, but if a VC comes to you and they're thinking about investing, and they ask you for all this stuff, and you have a lot of trouble producing it, and it looks super disorganized, they lose a bit of faith in you, and that will have an effect on the valuation they give you. If you are ready to go at a moment's notice, because all of your stuff is properly categorized, you've got everything in folders, all your trade licenses are up to date, your shareholders agreement there, all your trademarks are done, and it's all filed properly digitally, so if someone asks for it, you say, here's the link, there you go, let me know what else you need. That inspires huge confidence in you as a company. right? They won't even look at half the stuff. If your reaction time is like that, they absolutely love that. And it's such a rarity that you really stand out. So it's very boring to say be organized, but I can't tell you what a profound effect it can have from the standpoint of the investors. Huge, huge. Because they're not, particularly right now in the region, we're still in the early stage, they're not expecting it. They're expecting it to look like a shit show when they come in. So if you are super organized, and I've seen this, and like VC said, oh my God, you should have seen, we were blown away. These guys, we asked for their DD pack, they just sent us a Dropbox link. 10 minutes later, it had everything. It's all properly subfoldered all the way down. I didn't even look at 90% of the stuff because I was just had so much confidence in the way that they produced that and how quickly that I knew it was there. That's a huge effect. It's a good point.
Actually, like 50% of the whole show is about presenting. It's like a circus.
Optics. It's optics.
You're the
You're the ringmaster.
exactly.
Yeah.
We had this local company who are average revenue per year is 100 million Saudi riyals.
Yeah.
Who wanted to acquire a part of us. They actually like the lead, their president of the company. He said, "Yeah, we need to do tests on you, on your health. Do you smoke or not?" Like a joke. We are investing money not in the company, but in the founders.
No, as you get on, yeah, like one of the things you have to go through in due diligence, you have to go to a full physical.
Yeah.
Right? With doctor's report, blood tests, everything. They're not screwing around. People, someone's about to invest $50 million, $100 million in you, they own you.
Do you take drugs?
Right? They put an insurance policy on you, they do everything.
It depends, I think it depends on the stage.
Yeah, of course.
If, 500 startup, for example,
No.
I don't do that. So
No.
even sometimes it's close the deal less than 1 month.
500 startups, the way they look at their initial investment is that they're buying the right to invest in a future round. That's all they're doing. They know that 90% of the money is being flushed down the toilet. But for that handful of companies that do well, they've bought the ability to be able to invest in the future round, right? Because they'll have a follow-on round. So the company will be obliged to offer the future equity to them because they gave them money early.
Yeah, actually, one thing I wish we did pass that is moving to ADG. Well, before we need it. Because once your company is there, when you're talking to VCs, this will give you a lot of advantages. When the company is still here, you will be able to close the round faster. Especially when you're trying to raise, you're actually usually under the pressure of the other rates. And you want to close the round as soon as possible. So having your company ADG and before that is going to help you big time to close it as much faster than raising from VC. You have to forget about
And just to follow on that, is it globally recognized? I mean, let's say if I raised the first round from MENA VC, but for the next round I'm planning to get a regional VC, would they consider Abu Dhabi as
Yeah.
so it's similar to
500 startups is invested in Asian companies, Ramco is, Wamba is, yeah.
But what about this be more of
You go to the US?
US, for example? They,
No, the US won't recognize Cayman or BVI. They have problems. They want everything to be in Delaware. So it depends where you're going with the company.
Sure.
What's
Yeah.
the downside to go to ADG?
What are the downsides? As opposed to what? As opposed to just staying in Saudi or as opposed to going to BVI or Cayman? Just staying in Saudi. That you'll never raise venture capital from a VC. It's a pretty big downside. If you don't need to, then don't go to EDGM. Just stay here. But if you ever think, yeah, we will be approaching proper VCs or proper angel groups, you don't have a choice. They will not take shares in the Saudi LLC.
So what about Cayman?
Same thing. So Cayman, BVI, EDGM, yeah, they're all good with it. Yeah. So the reason these jurisdictions are popular because they don't have tax. So wherever the investors are anywhere in the world, if they're in China, the US, wherever, these are tax neutral jurisdictions. So there's no corporate tax. So it's neutral to everyone wherever they are in the world.
Where do they get the benefit of it?
Who's they?
Let's say the common law, like AGM.
Yeah.
Is there any, let's say, revenue that comes out of having those?
Well, of course, yeah, right, because you've paid them the license fee to create the company, and every year you have to pay the fee again.
So it's just that fee?
Yeah, and if you do like a share transfer, you add a director, there are little fees that incrementally add up. But what they're trying to do is to create an ecosystem that's there. So you can create an SPV, but now there are funds, like venture capital funds or private equity funds, that are setting up there because they know this infrastructure is there. It all just, it's compounding.